I was unwrapping my turkey sandwich in the staff lounge when I noticed them through the glass. Two individuals in navy sport coats, clipboards in hand, standing at my cubicle like they had just claimed the territory. My heart didn't skip. It didn't stutter. It simply knew. Marcy Kendall had finally pulled the trigger. The compliance officers were rifling through my workspace like it belonged to them. One snapped a photo of my monitor. The other, in latex gloves, opened my drawers as if I were radioactive. I watched for maybe half a minute before stepping out. "Find anything good?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. The taller one looked up. "Ms. Langston, this is a routine inspection based on formal reports of workplace violations." "Routine?" I repeated, nodding slightly. I already knew who filed the reports. Marcy was just 3 cubicles down, pretending to straighten up a file tray she'd already organized twice that morning. She had been laying the groundwork for this for months. "What kind of violations?" I asked, folding my arms. "Unprofessional behavior," said the shorter one without lifting his eyes. "Repeated inconsistencies in client communications, safety concerns related to workspace maintenance." I could barely hold back a smile. This was so very Marcy, dramatic and desperate, and so perfectly flawed. "We'll need to complete this inspection before you return to your workstation," the tall officer said. "Before I explain what happened next, take a second to tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm curious how far my voice can travel. And while you're at it, please like, subscribe, and tap the bell, because what happened next taught me more about corporate politics than any handbook ever could. My name is Celeste Langston. I'm 42, and I've been managing high-profile client accounts at Denville Mutual in Scottsdale, Arizona, for the last 5 years. I've earned trust, bonuses, and more than a few tough contracts turned successful. If you found strength in this story, I'd love for you to be part of this growing community where quiet resilience, truth, and dignity lead the way. Go ahead and click subscribe, and make sure to hit the bell so you won't miss what comes next. The journey doesn't end here. In fact, the next story may echo your own or offer the encouragement you didn't know you needed. Every week, I share real stories of people who turned adversity into quiet power. Join us and let these stories remind you, you're never alone in navigating difficult people with grace. Marcy arrived 6 months after me, and from day one, it was clear she believed my desk should have been hers. She had this compulsive need to be the smartest person in the room. She'd interrupt my client calls to clarify points I'd already nailed. She CC'd our director on emails with fake grammar corrections. She'd latch onto my projects, then suggest fixes that were more confusing than useful. But what truly drove her wild? I didn't advertise my wins. I just did my job well and let the results speak. And that, to someone like Marcy, was intolerable. When I landed a major client, I didn't make an announcement in the team meeting. When customers sent thank you emails, I didn't forward them to our director or paste them in group chats. I just did my job, delivered results, and went home. And that drove Marcy Kendall absolutely nuts because she couldn't compete with quiet competence. You can't outshine someone who doesn't need the spotlight. So she started watching me closely. She'd jot down what time I arrived in the morning, how many minutes I spent on lunch, whether I used the same mug twice. She'd breeze past my desk accidentally, trying to glimpse what was on my screen. She'd ask leading questions about my workflows, pretending to be curious, but really fishing for mistakes. I saw it all happening early. Marcy wasn't just competitive. She was constructing a case. She needed a fall. She needed mine. So I let her build one. I started planting inconsistencies. Nothing serious, just small errors that someone obsessively tracking me might flag. I'd email, "Let's connect Thursday," when I meant Friday, then send a correction. I'd drop a report into the wrong subfolder, fix it the next day. I even swapped affect for effect in a draft, knowing I'd catch it during edits. These weren't real mistakes. They were bait. And Marcy couldn't resist. She created a folder. I know, because I saw it when she left her screen unlocked during a restroom run. Celeste Langston, performance log. Inside, emails, screen captures, even handwritten notes tracking trends. It was wild. But while Marcy was building her prosecution kit, I was doing something else. Something far more powerful. I kept a gratitude journal, not for HR, not for performance reviews, just a simple practice I picked up from a podcast during one of my morning commutes. Every evening before heading home, I wrote down 3 positive work moments from that day. A client who called to say thank you, a teammate who lent a hand during a tight deadline, a manager who offered clear, helpful feedback. I stored it in my drawer with my pens and stapler. No secrets, just a brown leather-bound notebook filled with dated, honest reflections. Like, Derek in IT helped me recover a lost file. Saved my entire afternoon. Client Miss Jensen complimented my clarity on our proposal call. Jamila brought in donuts for the team just because. Those pages became a mirror, not just of my work, but of who truly showed up for others. And in 18 months of daily entries, Marcy Kendall's name never appeared once. It's moments like those that reminded me why I loved my work. Just last week, Jamila brought fresh coffee for the whole team before our quarterly budget review. Small gestures like that, they made Denville Mutual feel less like a corporation and more like a community. Month after month, I filled pages in my gratitude journal with similar observations. If someone showed professionalism, kindness, or even a little extra effort, they earned a mention. Every entry was dated and included a quick note about what made that moment stand out. Over time, without realizing it, I'd created something like an informal audit of workplace dynamics. A quiet, consistent record of who made the office better. Some names showed up constantly. Derek from IT appeared often, always patient, always helpful when a system crashed or a file vanished. Jamila from HR had her fair share of mentions too, recognized for everything from her calming presence in tense meetings to her habit of leaving thank you notes for coworkers. Even our no-nonsense supervisor, Mr. Halperin, earned praise for his honest feedback and balanced leadership. But one name? Not once. In over 18 months of entries, Marcy Kendall had never earned a single line. Not one helpful action, not one genuine compliment, not one moment of collaboration or generosity. It wasn't intentional. I never sat down to track who was included or who wasn't. But when I flipped through the pages, the pattern was impossible to ignore. While others had built bridges and supported one another, Marcy had hovered in the background, watching, correcting, criticizing, never contributing. She existed in our space like a shadow, always present, never illuminating. 6 months after I'd started the journal, Marcy made her move. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when she requested a formal meeting with Mr. Halperin and the compliance team. She showed up with a tabbed binder, her so-called evidence. Her voice was calm, her tone concerned, as she accused me of consistent performance issues and unprofessional behavior that, in her words, put our client relationships at risk. She presented email screenshots, misfiled folders, and out-of-context examples. She claimed she had been documenting my errors for the good of the department. Mr. Halperin, ever methodical, reviewed her materials and agreed to authorize a compliance inspection. What I didn't know, what Marcy pushed for behind closed doors, was that the inspection would happen during my lunch break. And that's how I ended up standing in the hallway, clutching half a turkey sandwich, while 2 compliance officers tore through my workspace like something criminal had just been uncovered. They opened my filing cabinet and found exactly what they didn't expect. Rows of alphabetized, color-coded folders, each one clearly labeled, cross-referenced, and up-to-date. Then came the emails. Dozens of client threads, clean formatting, professional tone, concise summaries. Nothing out of place. The shorter officer opened the bottom drawer of my desk and paused. "What's this?" he asked, holding up my leather-bound gratitude journal. "Personal notes," I replied. "Just reflections about work." He flipped through a few pages, reading silently. Then he glanced at his colleague and nodded toward something in the journal I couldn't see. A silent conversation passed between them. Sharp, serious. "Ms. Langston," the taller one said, "would you mind if we reviewed this more thoroughly? It appears to contain detailed workplace observations that may be relevant to our inquiry." "Of course," I said. "Take whatever time you need." What happened next is something I'll never forget. They sat down at my desk and began reading the journal. From page 1. Slowly, Thoroughly. They weren't skimming. They were studying, pointing at entries, whispering, turning pages like they were reading witness statements in a court case. 5 minutes passed, then 10. By 15, the energy in the office shifted. Conversations quieted. Heads subtly turned toward my cubicle. You could feel the tension building. Marcy drifted closer, pretending to tidy a filing tray, trying to see what had drawn their complete focus. After nearly 20 minutes, the shorter officer looked up. "Ms. Langston," he asked carefully, "how long have you been keeping this journal?" "About a year and a half," I said. "And these entries," he continued, "are they all real? No embellishments or intent to influence your record?" That caught me off guard. "No," I said. "They're just small things I notice. Kindnesses, cooperation, good leadership. I started doing it because it helped me stay grounded on stressful days." The officers exchanged another look. Then the taller one stood and walked directly over to Marcy. "Miss Kendall," he said, "could we have a private word?" I watched Marcy's face go pale. Her posture stiffened. She followed them into the conference room at the far end of the floor. The glass walls revealed everything but sound. Inside, I saw the unraveling. First confusion, then frustration, then what looked a lot like panic. They were in there nearly 30 minutes. When they returned, Marcy's eyes were red. She didn't look at anyone, just walked back to her cubicle and sat down. The officers returned to me. "Ms. Langston," the shorter one said, "after reviewing the material and conducting our inspection, based on the evidence presented to us," the shorter officer said, "and our own examination of your workspace and documentation, we're closing this investigation. We found no signs of misconduct or policy violations." Relief washed over me, steady, quiet, almost too heavy to process all at once. But I could tell he wasn't finished. "However," the taller officer added, flipping to a page in my gratitude journal, "we'd like to share something that emerged during our review." He placed the open notebook gently in front of me. "In the past 18 months, you've written about 63 individuals, co-workers, managers, vendors, custodians, clients, even the evening security staff, all noted for acts of professionalism, generosity, or support." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "But Miss Kendall's name," he continued, "never appears. Not once." The words hung there like a held breath. I looked at the page, then at the officers, then toward the glass-walled conference room, where Marcy still sat alone, her posture rigid. "That wasn't intentional," I said quietly. "I never made a list of who to include or not. I just wrote about moments that felt meaningful." I paused, swallowing the rest of the thought before finishing it aloud. "Because saying it out loud would make it real," the shorter officer said. "Finishing it for me? We understand. And I think Miss Kendall understands now too." They closed the journal and handed it back to me. "The irony," the taller one said, "is that she spent all her energy building a case against you without ever realizing what her own behavior looked like from the outside." He nodded toward the journal. "This became a better reflection of office culture than any official report could have provided." They gathered their materials and began walking away. As they turned down the hallway, I overheard one whisper to the other. 18 months! Not a single mention. Can you imagine being that consistent? The rest faded into the distance. I sat at my desk, holding the notebook that had nearly become evidence, and instead became proof of something deeper. Around me, the office slowly resumed its rhythm. The clack of keyboards, phones ringing, conversations about vendor quotes and deadlines. But something had shifted. The investigation meant to ruin me had instead revealed something far more damaging. About Marcy Kendall. She had spent months documenting my harmless errors, never realizing that her own toxicity had made her invisible in every act of appreciation that passed through our workplace. She tried to prove I didn't belong, but now, everyone saw the truth. And no one was looking at me. They were all looking at her. I figured Marcy had gone home early, maybe to process everything, or maybe just to dodge the sidelong glances from coworkers who'd watched the investigation unfold. But the next morning, she was back, and something was different. She walked in right at 9 a.m., offered quiet greetings to those who acknowledged her, then sat at her desk without her usual flurry of activity. No dramatic sighs about her workload. No loud calls to vendors meant to show off her expertise. No pacing the office with unsolicited feedback on projects that weren't hers. She just worked, quietly, like the rest of us. I thought maybe the investigation had sparked something. Maybe she saw how her behavior came across and decided to change. Maybe this whole ordeal would somehow lead to growth. For all of us, I was so naive. 3 days later, Derek from IT stopped by my desk during his usual coffee break. "Hey, Celeste," he said, voice low. "Can I ask you something weird?" "Sure," I replied, saving a spreadsheet I'd been cleaning up. "Did you know Marcy's been asking people about your journal?" My stomach tightened. "What do you mean?" I asked. "She pulled me aside in the hallway yesterday. Started asking if I knew you were keeping track of people at work, whether I thought it was ethical or made me uncomfortable, if it felt like surveillance." A chill ran down my spine. "What did you tell her?" I told her the truth, that I think it's actually kind of amazing, that it's rare for anyone to recognize the good stuff around here. He leaned in slightly. "But Celeste, she's not just asking me, she's talking to everyone. Jamila, Mr. Halperin, people in departments you don't even work with." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The realization hit me like a freight train. Marcy hadn't changed. She was doubling down. She couldn't handle that the investigation exposed her toxicity, so now she was trying to flip the narrative, to twist my gratitude journal into something dark. A violation. A threat. "Has anyone believed her?" I asked quietly. Derek shook his head. "Not really. Most think she's reaching. But you know Marcy. She's subtle. She plants doubt like it's a seed. Just keeps watering it." I nodded. I knew exactly how she operated. Manipulation masked as concern. Undermining dressed up as caution. And once again, I could feel her preparing her next move. When direct confrontation failed, Marcy shifted back into her preferred method. Subtle manipulation. She began twisting my moment of vindication into something sinister, trying to reframe it as a violation instead of a reflection of truth. That afternoon, I decided to test what Derek had warned me about. I paid attention to how people interacted with me. Were conversations shorter? Was anyone suddenly cautious? For the first few days, everything seemed normal. But by Friday, I began noticing small shifts. If this story moved you, or reminded you of your own quiet strength, I invite you to subscribe to the channel, where every week we explore true stories of dignity, justice, and the power of staying grounded when others try to shake you. Hit the bell so you won't miss the next chapter, where we follow another workplace journey that may feel all too familiar. These aren't just stories. They're reminders that resilience doesn't always shout. Sometimes it simply endures. So if you're ready for more, come along. Your presence here means more than you know. And the next story starts soon. Jamila from HR, who usually stopped by with a smile or a quick story, suddenly avoided eye contact and claimed to be on deadline when I approached. Mr. Halperin's emails, which used to include encouraging comments or quick check-ins, became colder, strictly task-focused, clipped. Even Thomas, the security guard who usually greeted me with a joke each morning, just gave a polite nod and turned back to his monitor. Marcy was poisoning the well, quietly, strategically. I realized I had two choices: confront her directly and risk looking defensive, or dismantle her narrative with something far more powerful: transparency. The next Monday, I sent a department-wide email. The subject line was simple: personal journal, transparency, and consent. Here's what I wrote. "Hi, everyone. You may have heard that I keep a personal gratitude journal where I occasionally note positive workplace interactions. I wanted to be completely transparent about this habit and ensure no one feels uncomfortable. The journal is private, a way for me to focus on the good things that happen throughout the day. It's never been shared with management or used for any professional gain. That said, if you'd prefer that I not mention any of our interactions in it, I completely respect that. Just let me know. It won't affect how we work together or how much I value our collaboration. Thanks for reading." Celeste. I hit send and waited. Within an hour, replies started coming in, dozens of them. The first was from Jamila. Celeste, I think that's beautiful. Please don't stop. We need more of that around here. Then Derek, keep going. Honestly, it's one of the healthiest things I've heard someone do in this place. Mr. Halperin replied later in the afternoon, Celeste, thank you for your honesty and thoughtfulness. Your approach reflects maturity and professionalism, something we need more of, not less. By the end of the day, I had 37 replies. 36 were supportive. One person didn't respond at all. Marcy. Mr. Halperin's reply was longer and more thoughtful than I expected. Celeste, he wrote, your gratitude practice strikes me as a meaningful and constructive way to maintain perspective in what can often be a high-pressure environment. I truly appreciate your transparency, and the way you've handled this situation reflects exceptional professionalism. One by one, my inbox filled with similar messages, words of encouragement, questions about how to start their own journals, stories about how one small compliment or gesture had changed the course of someone's day, or even their entire week. By the end of the day, I had 37 responses. 36 were warm, positive, and supportive. One person didn't reply at all. Marcy's silence rang louder than any message she could have written. While the rest of the department leaned into appreciation, she stayed silent. Because to respond, to participate, would mean acknowledging that her assumptions about me, my motivations, and the entire team's response had been wrong. But the most revealing part hadn't even happened yet. Over the next week, something shifted in our office. Jamila started leaving handwritten thank you notes for teammates who helped her with projects. Derek brought in a tray of cookies with a note taped to the box that read, "Grateful to work with such a solid team." Mr. Halperin opened our next team meeting by recognizing one employee who had gone above and beyond that week. Gratitude was spreading like wildfire, and it was changing the entire atmosphere of the workplace, lightening it, sharpening it, energizing it. Everyone leaned into it, everyone except Marcy. Because in a workplace that had become a mirror of positive acknowledgement, her behavior stood out more than ever. The interruptions, the passive-aggressive tone, the constant need to control conversations. It all rang louder now, more out of place. I watched her try to mimic the shift. She started saying thank you more often, but her tone was stiff, unnatural. She gave compliments that felt more like criticisms, wrapped in a smile. She even announced she was keeping her own journal. But instead of writing about what she appreciated in others, her entries revolved around her own accomplishments. It was uncomfortable and obvious. The rest of us were lifting each other up. She remained rooted in tearing others down. 3 weeks after I sent my email, Mr. Halperin called me into his office. Celeste, he said, I just wanted to personally thank you for introducing this practice. The shift in morale has been extraordinary. I'm really glad it helped, I said. He leaned forward. That said, it's also brought something else to light, a troubling pattern involving one of your colleagues. He didn't have to say her name. I knew. I've been paying closer attention to team interactions since your email, Mr. Halperin said, his tone measured but firm. And while most people are fully embracing this culture of appreciation, there's one person who seems either unwilling or unable to participate. He opened a slim navy folder on his desk. I've also reviewed every complaint, concern, and interpersonal report submitted over the past 6 months. On their own, they seemed minor. Tone issues, occasional communication breakdowns, but viewed together, in light of our recent shift in perspective, a very different picture comes into focus. He slid the document across the desk so I could see. A list of incidents, each one involving Marcy. Undermining a team member during a presentation, creating friction over file access, questioning others' expertise in meetings, isolating new hires. All documented, all recent. And then there's the compliance investigation, he continued. She used official resources to pursue a personal vendetta under the guise of concern for team performance. If this story spoke to something you've lived through or something you're still carrying, take a quiet moment to subscribe to the channel. These stories aren't just reflections. They're bridges to the next chapter of healing, clarity, and quiet power. By hitting that bell, You won't miss the upcoming story, where another voice finds strength in a place they were once silenced. You belong in this community of people who've seen too much to be fooled and felt too deeply to give up. So come along, because the next story might just hold the moment you've been waiting for. And it starts soon. He closed the folder and looked me in the eye. Celeste, your gratitude journal didn't just uplift morale. It gave us a new lens to evaluate how this team functions. And once we could clearly see what healthy, respectful collaboration looks like, well, the contrast became impossible to ignore. I nodded, trying to take it all in. Marcy has been reassigned, he said, not as punishment, but to a department where her role will be more individually focused, less interdependent. It's not a demotion, but it is a recognition that our collaborative environment isn't a good fit. A strange mix of emotions hit me. Relief, certainly, but also sadness, that it had to come to this. Mr. Halperin continued. The irony, of course, is that Marcy's efforts to discredit you ended up confirming your value. That journal she tried to use against you, it showed just how much respect and trust you've earned from nearly every person on this floor. He was right. Something I'd started quietly, for myself, had become something far more meaningful. My journal turned into a mirror, not just for me, but for the entire team. And in that mirror, Marcy had been forced to confront a reflection she couldn't escape. 2 months later, I heard through the grapevine that she'd requested a transfer to our Phoenix branch. A clean slate, new coworkers, no reputation. I genuinely wished her well, because now I understood. Her behavior was never really about me. It was about the emptiness she couldn't face when others succeeded. And the truth I recorded, day by day, had made that impossible to ignore. My gratitude journal still sits in the top drawer of my desk at Denville Mutual. And yes, I still write in it every evening before I pack up and head home. But these days, it serves a deeper purpose than when I first started. Back then, it was a simple tool to help me stay grounded. A personal reminder to notice the good in even the most ordinary workdays. Now, it's something else entirely. A quiet but powerful testament to what really matters in a workplace. It's a reminder that how we treat people matters. That small gestures, an encouraging word, a shared laugh, a genuine thank you, can ripple through an office more powerfully than titles or performance metrics. That authenticity will always outlast manipulation. That kindness leaves a trail, and that trail tells the truth, whether or not we're trying to prove anything. I used to think that the only way to push back against cruelty or injustice was to fight it head-on. But I've learned something else entirely. Sometimes, the best form of justice isn't confrontation or punishment. It's cultivating an environment where toxic behavior simply has no room to thrive, where the people who build others up are valued, and the ones who tear others down are quietly exposed by contrast. If this story resonates with you, if you've ever worked with someone who tried to make you feel small, who questioned your value because of their own insecurity, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Share your story, or just let me know you're out there, navigating your own version of this experience. And if you're someone who believes in building better workplaces, not by shouting louder, but by standing in quiet truth, I invite you to stick around. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell if you want to hear more stories like this. Stories about the battles we fight behind the conference room glass, and the strength it takes to win them without ever raising your voice. Your support means more than you know. Because if telling this story helps even one person feel less alone, then every quiet entry in that little brown journal was worth it. Every page, every sentence, every name, even the ones I never had to write down.